we're in the principal spot. Fuck yeah.
They don't search or nothing, do they?
Well, there shouldn't be any food in here.
Oh man, can you reach my water up there?
All of it. It's on the other side, is it? Oh, I see it.
Ebony, you need to see glasses?
Yes, please. You have them? What's up, twin mama? You're first. All right, so we're here at the Oakland Elementary School in Denver. We are here at the Citizens Oversight, which is we have some of the big wigs over here. They're going to be talking about the lowering of the bonds on people who are poor, for misdemeanors and garbage, right? So we're trying to see. It's called the Citizens Oversight Board. Good evening. Quarterly Public Forum. I'm here with Janet, Karen. See what kind of lies they're talking about here.
Oh, it's about mail too.
What it's about. Yeah, I already read that. I saw it. I had to write a comment there.
January and May that are pretty critical. And then we're going to hear again from Dr. McGee about a criminal justice program that's been implemented down in New Orleans. Before we jump in the program, though, I would like to introduce a couple of special guests. First, I'd like to introduce
Liberty Fake TV.
Mitchell. He's here with us, really just to support, I think, today. Sometimes he presents for us, but not today. Also, Lieutenant Penn, who's representing the Denver Police District 5. Thank you very much for being here, Lieutenant. We appreciate you. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started with the program. So, in the last legislative session, the General Assembly passed a series of criminal justice reform measures, some more simple or straightforward than others, but two in particular we thought were worth having a discussion in the community to let folks know about them and help folks understand them a little bit better. The first one that we want to talk about is Senate Bill 19-191, which is titled Prompt Pretrial Liberty and Fairness, which are really important words, powerful words. What does that actually all mean? We are grateful to have with us Denise Mays from the ACLU, who helped with these measures to help explain them. So would you mind if I just come to you, Denise, and you can maybe tell us a bit more about
I mind a little, but.
Thank you.
So, Senate Bill 191 is kind of a, let me just give like one step back and give some background. There's a lot of really weird things happening throughout the state of Colorado and in municipal courts and in state and county courts that have to do with the notion of money bail. What that means is that if you can't afford the toll to get out of jail, then you're stuck in jail. And so we had a series of different legislative attempts to sort of chip away at that notion that poverty is not a crime. Meaning you shouldn't be in jail simply because you can't afford the toll to get out.
That's right.
And House Bill 1225 and Senate Bill 191 are two pretty big, significant pieces of legislation that our legislature passed and the governor signed into law. What we found across the state, for example, is that in certain counties, you were only allowed to post bail at certain times of the week on certain days. So, for example, in Arapahoe County, you could only post it on Wednesdays between 4 and 6 and Thursdays between 10 and 12. And that was the case all over the state in various counties and in various municipalities. So what House Bill 191 says is that no matter where you are incarcerated, where you are arrested, that you have to be able to post your bond within 2 hours of arrest.
That's
so
right.
That's now uniform across the state of Colorado. The other piece of this legislation, which I acknowledge and will tell you was all about Denver, is that you have to be released within 4 hours of posting your bond. What was happening in Denver was that you could be in jail after posting your bond for up to 24 hours, we have found, in some instances, even longer, for no reason at all. We have Sheriff Elder, who is the sheriff of the largest jail in the state of Colorado, El Paso County, who can get his people out in less than 4 hours. For some reason, Denver couldn't do it on their own, so they needed a little bit of legislative help to get them there. So that's another piece of Senate Bill 191 that's really important for Denver residents. The other piece of it, which is also important, which was not only, Denver didn't only serve the genesis of this, there were other municipalities and county courts that were doing this, but it is called what we refer to as let the bond be the bond. Some of you may have heard of an individual named Mickey Howard. He came into the Denver jail with $35. The court set his bond at $10, which means the judge really wanted him out, but the judge also wanted a $10 bond. Well, Mickey Howard came into the jail with $35. He could have afforded his $10 bond, but what he didn't realize is Denver put on top of that and took first his fines and fees, his bond fee, his jail fee, so now he was $65 underwater. So he could no longer post his $10 bond, even though he came into the jail with $35. So what this portion of Senate Bill 191 says is let the bond be the bond, and that money goes out first. We sued Denver on the Mickey Howard case, and immediately Denver said, you're right, it's kind of dumb that we're doing that. And so Denver backed off, no longer does these fines and fees. They did it even before Senate Bill 191 was passed. But those are I think, the 3 biggest components of Senate Bill 191 that should hopefully make a big difference in people's lives when they come in contact with the Denver jail.
Nice job.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the other one, you actually already mentioned this, Denise, is House Bill 1225, which is basically titled No Monetary Bail for Certain Low-Level Offenses. Do you mind explaining to us a little bit about, do you mind? Would you please?
And I don't mind at all, actually, I'm just giving you
I know.
some hard time.
So that we can, yeah, get a full picture of that one as well.
Right, so House Bill 1225 basically says, for the pettiest of offenses, for the lowest of crimes, you shouldn't be held on money bond whatsoever. So you pee in the park, you shouldn't be held on money bail. Urban camping ban, you shouldn't be held on money bail. Now, what are the purposes of money bail? We can dispute back and forth whether the stated purposes of money bail is really holding up to its intent in any way, shape, or form. But if one of the things that you ever wanted to do with money bail is keep people from reoffending, the kinds of crimes we're talking about are sort of ridiculous to hold people in on cash or money. You're homeless, and so, oh, we don't want you to trespass. What are the chances that once you're released, you're going to do that? But not a safety to the community. Driving too slowly, dog off leash, failure to obey an order from a peace officer, regardless of how insignificant it is, littering, public urination, noise violations. Those are the kinds of offenses that don't present any great risk to the community whatsoever. What we're saying in House Bill 1225 is you have to be released immediately without posting money bail.
Yeah.
The simplest, pettiest of offenses, you shouldn't be held because you're too poor to pay to get out.
Good job, good job.
Thank you for the explanation. We appreciate you being here and giving us
Yes.
that detail.
Thank you.
So we have Judge Spahn here because she presides over the Denver County Court, and I was just hoping that you might explain how the court works in connection with these issues, how you all do bail, and how that process works.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. One thing I would just share that anything I talked about today, we cannot take all the credit for any policy that we've worked on because there's many, many stakeholders in Denver who come together to work on these issues, and also people before me. When I was appointed, it was one of, we have a very diverse bench. We have a bench who very much cares about people over incarceration issues, and it's been a priority for us. What we did when we, about 22 years ago, is we put together a symposium at the law school. We partnered with the law school, and we brought people from all over the United States to really look over incarceration issues. And one of the speakers we brought was from California, Mrs. Burton, becoming Mrs. Burton, and we wanted her to talk about just her life where she was over-incarcerated, where she spent, I think, 10 prison sentences, and the real issue that was underlying for her was trauma. And they were, 10 different sentences that had to do with substance abuse issues. And now she started a nonprofit, and she has changed so many women's lives. And we brought her to kind of kick off, and we have all of our stakeholders there. We have the Public Defender's Office, the DAs, our pretrial services, all of our judges, all of the clerks, to really just set the tone for 2 days where we can sit and look at over incarceration issues. We brought people, the experts who've done rigorous studies to show if you keep somebody in jail for 24 hours, if they're picked up on a bond and you can get them before a judge, you can create an opportunity for them to post bond. They will return to court. Recidivism rates are not very high, and also it doesn't impact their life that much. Not saying that incarceration one night doesn't impact their lives, but if you hold people for 2 days, it changes their lives forever. It makes them lose their jobs, it catapults them into homelessness. And so we brought all of those people together so we could really sit down and think together as a city. And that was kind of our jumping off part from there. One thing when Mrs. Burton came, what she asked for is that she go with Judge Fay to our Denver County Jail, to the female part of the jail. And she wanted to meet every single female that was in the jail and give them her book. And that's when we started on Sunday. So it's been always a very important issue to us. I know several years ago when we started looking at bonds and bond issues, I think we were at about 14% PR bonds, and this is before I was a presiding judge. And Judge Marcucci worked really hard to bring people together in pretrial services and have different instruments so we could change that. Today, if you look at all of our felonies, I think our felonies right now are at 68% PR bonds, which is significant. We're leading in the state. It doesn't mean we don't look at safety, because our community has a right to be safe. We have a number of instruments who are doing assessments for us, and at any given day, we have 2,500 people out on bond in the city and county of Denver. So it's been a big priority for us. In our judges, for a very long time, I can think of several of the judges that are sitting there. We have been very keenly aware that we don't want people who are trespassing, we don't want people who have small crimes to not get PR bonds. The case that you talked about is because, I think it was Judge Simonet's case, in Denver there's an ordinance, and it says that there are certain case types that even if the judge wants to give a 100% PR bond, the judge does not have the discretion. The city attorney has the right to object. So out of frustration, when the city, and there's nothing the judge can do, so the judge a lot of times would put that in an amount so low so they could give the person an opportunity where maybe they were asking for a $500 bond. So a lot of times we're working within parameters that are beyond our control. We have done a number of things in our city, before even all the laws passed, which are very important legislation. We run weekend court on Saturday and Sunday. We run two courts every Saturday and Sunday. And I think I'm not sure if any other jurisdictions are doing that right now, but the reason
Very few do, and that's a good thing for Denver.
And the reason we do that is because we don't want people to wait till Monday to come and see a judge. And we're running two courts at the same time with the help of the public defenders and the DAs. We're processing those cases because once we set the bond, we've actually been able to lower our hours. We get done much earlier than historically because of the fact that we're able to run courts over weekends, and that's always been a priority for us. The other thing that we've worked really hard on is a couple years ago, and again, I can't take the credit, was a number of stakeholders in Denver, is we have an outreach court where a lot of people that have low-level crimes that were chronically homeless were just getting picked up on bond, FTA warrants is what I would call them, and going into jail. They can't take everything they own with them in the jail, and it's really a hardship on them. So we have
posting it on them.
We have the court, outreach court. It's at the rescue mission, and it is this year. I think we've taken care of 1,400 warrants. Those are people who have not had to go into the Denver County Jail, and we take care of all the warrants. We pull all their cases. They do community service right there, so they're giving back to the community. They're able to take care of the cases. Last year, I think we did about 2,000, and the year before, we just started it off. So those issues are very important to us. They're things that we're keenly aware of, and they're definitely a focus for our bench.
Thank you, Judge Bond. I appreciate that. Does any other board member have any questions for either Ms. Mays or Judge Peterson?
Easy crowd, right?
Exactly.
I do have one. I don't know whether it's not, probably a good question for you, Judge Spock. What are the options, or what does classify as a low-level offense, right? Because there's a certain amount of interpretation in that low-level offense, but just to give us an idea of what that looks like outside of the ones that have been mentioned here, what would that look like?
I think, obviously domestic violence is something very separate and very different, so I'm going to set those cases aside. But if you sit in our courts, especially 2100, and you watch, or you sit in any of our general sessions courts, those are in Denver, kind of the different misdemeanor type cases I can think of, or if you sit in our other courtrooms, you will see, especially in 2100, that the vast majority are really PR bonds. If you look at our felony court, which are the much more serious cases, even there we're at about 68% PR bonds. I was trying to pull the stats on the lower level cases that we have that are in our different courts because they're much higher, but I couldn't get those in time. But they're, we're at 68% for felonies. If you just come into 2100 and watch it, if it's not a domestic violence, you're likely to get a PR bond. And actually, we've done a lot of policy change too. On all traffic cases, along maybe 2 years ago, we have worked with all of our magistrates and all of our judicial officers that if it's a traffic case or anything like that, we don't want people to go into Denver County Jail. Safety, if there are safety issues, that's different. On those low-level cases, those are not safety issues. And we have a firm policy out of traffic, even if you're chronically FTA, you get a PR bond. And those are that we handle 150,000 cases a year. but people who can't make it to traffic court are not somebody we want in the Denver County Jail. And so we do not issue, you're aggressively issued bail bonds.
Thank you.
Just one, yes, maybe it's a little bit of my question too. I think it's always interesting that DV is always segregated out, if you will. Because at the end of the day, you can have a DV charge, but if you can afford the bond, you're getting out. So this notion that we say, oh, DV cases are handled separately, what we really mean is DV cases of people with money and people without.
That's right.
Because if you can afford the bond, it doesn't matter how severe your DV case is.
Yes.
You're paying and you're getting out. It's the poor ones that stay in jail.
Yes.
I mean, that's just the way it works. That's the way the system works.
Well, I would just go to say that if you look at the 60% that we have, there are a lot of DV cases where we're assessing risk, we're working in the community, and many people understand that. I'm not saying that those, I don't want anyone to think that the DV cases don't get PR bonds, because they do.
What happened to the $30 fine that they were taking up front? What happened to that? Because it goes into the supposed to be for mental health services and things like that. Where does that money still come out, or is it's not?
From the offender or
Yes.
or the defendant? Well, I mean, I think what was happening is taking that money off the top. And so if they didn't have money to pay bond, then if they didn't have the money to pay that, it would be something that would follow them throughout their court case, which would happen in any instance. There are several different places throughout the court process where the county or the city or the state can collect their fees. They don't have to take it off first and not let them bond out. And that's kind of what we're saying in 191 is you have a court proceeding to go through, so you can
This lady does not like this lady.
for the state or the county or the city to get some of those fees.
She's from the
They just don't
ACLU.
get to get them at
She's from the
front
corrupt
end
city of
and
Denver.
have to stay in jail until you can pay them. I think that's the only difference. And
They're
mind
not-
you, in the
they're not
Mr. Howard
friends.
case, ultimately, his case was dismissed. So the irony that he would have stayed in jail and have to pay all these fines and fees, when in fact, the charges were dropped against him eventually.
And Denise, I would like to say this.
Mhm.
The minute that case, you brought that to our attention with Lauren Smith, the minute you brought that to our attention, we literally, I entered an order forthwith that no one be held. I wasn't aware of those fees, I'm not saying there shouldn't be. I entered an order forthwith, thanks to your help, that no one was going to be held because they couldn't make a $30 fine. And then we immediately went in with my court administrator and changed the ordinance so people would not be held.
That's
So-
absolutely true. With the help of the city attorney's office, that came to a quick resolution.
And I think that was great teamwork.
It just took a little lawsuit, but, you know.
That's right.
We're all about doing it. It's okay.
Make them pay.
Only took a little lawsuit.
I don't think I was party to the lawsuit.
No, you were not.
I was not the party to the
No,
lawsuit.
you definitely were not. Definitely were not.
Should have been with
Judge Spahn has done some good work, so I don't want to take away from that at all.
Absolutely. I think one follow-up question I have is just basically if these laws go into effect when?
Both of them are in effect already, portions of them. I think the only aspect of 191 that isn't in effect is one of the things that Judge Spahn referenced, and Denver is unique this way and wonderful, is that there are many counties that do not have 6 or 7 day a week court. And so you do have to wait, if you're arrested on a Friday, you have to wait till Monday till your first proceeding or your first appearance. That's the case. If it's a 3-day weekend, you gotta wait till Tuesday. So a portion of 191 is studying how we can do 6 or 7 day a week court throughout the state. And so that portion of the bill is not yet in effect.
I think at this point, in the interest of time and our guest time, I'd like to open up for very few minutes to see if there's anyone in the audience who actually has a question for Judge Spahn or for Ms. Mays. If you do, there's a microphone up front here, and what I'd ask you is you can please just give your name and ask your question. And again, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you to please limit your comments to no more than a couple minutes.
Thank you. My name is Wes Deary. I'm with Together Colorado, which is a faith-based, nonpartisan community activist group. And I thank all of you for what you're doing to help improve our criminal justice system. And I timed the questions. It's a minute and 15 seconds. I believe that the war on drugs in the United States has resulted in lots of unnecessary incarceration, and that competition for selling illegal drugs on the street causes a lot of gang violence, similar to the gang violence that occurred in the 1920s and 30s because of the prohibition of alcohol. I also believe our inability to regulate the quality and the potency of illegal drugs causes a lot of overdoses and medical emergencies. For these reasons, I am convinced now that it is time to try legalizing some of the more popular recreational drugs like cocaine, meth, heroin, and other opioids. Legalizing these drugs would allow the government to regulate how they're made and distributed. It would reduce prices to where gangs can't make a profit on them. Of course, it would allow taxes to be collected on them. I also think that addicts should be able to get a prescription for drugs if they agree to be under medical supervision. So this is a question for Judge Pond, but anybody can respond. Do you agree with any of this idea? If not, what is your most radical proposal for fixing the war on drugs?
Well, obviously, I mean, that's an issue that we're working with right now in our city because the felonies, formerly F4 possession cases are now going to be misdemeanor cases in Denver. And what has been a big priority for us is to see how we can really help people and not give, I mean, how can we make a difference in their lives if there's a chance in not making it an incarceration issue. And so we're kind of looking nationally to see where our best practices. But one thing I think that has been a priority for us that we asked in our budget is treatment. Treatment is what's lacking, and treatment is what we need in our city. And so that's really a big priority for us.
Usually it's paid for by the...
Can I just address that for a little bit? You know, when Judge Pond is correct, it's not just in Denver that drug possession is defelonized, that's statewide. That was House Bill 1263 that passed out in this legislative session. And I'll tell you, you would have thought that with that bill, there were going to be meth and coke trucks at the Civic Center Park. That is how vigorously certain district attorneys, law enforcement fought that bill. So that was radical. And all that bill said was for the simplest of drug possession, you would have a misdemeanor instead of a felony, because there's lots of repercussions that come with felonies, not only longer prison sentences. But the second piece of House Bill 1263 said is we're going to prioritize treatment, which is really what you ought to be doing in any sort of drug possession case. And frankly, I shouldn't even say in all of them, some people want to just use drugs. Doesn't mean they're addicted, doesn't mean they have some illness. Some people just want to use drugs, whatever. I don't, but that's not the point. So I think that having a different orientation about what drug use and what drugs are being used is something that we got to continue to talk about. Because if defelonization is radical, we got a lot of work to do.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Hello, my name is Karen Sedaro. I am an activist and civil rights activist. I believe I've been before you've been cleared. I'm not sure about that, but I've been through a lot of a couple things really quick. I don't have anything written down and stuff. But like one thing, I think we should, on the police side, like DPD and stuff, there are so many things. If you look for our homeless, basically homeless, you get arrested for much minor offenses than if you see someone that looks like they're not homeless do the same thing and not get arrested for. That is blatantly true, and we've seen it throughout the city in our organization. Also, the court system, we've seen sort of the same thing, but I've seen in many ways and know many people that have gone through the drug courts. It seems like if you have a problem with drugs or alcohol, you get all these chances. You have the drug court, you get all these chances. But if you're homeless or mental health basically, you don't get all these chances. The mental health is abused throughout the system throughout in the jail and the judicial system. They don't know they don't know the rights, they don't know how to react. And most of the public defenders that help these people just are pushing, take a deal. And they don't know any better, they take a deal. And they get criminalized for doing these same simple things that they should not be arrested for in the same place, at the same time. And you don't see other people with money and stuff going through the system like this and having to go up before a judge and stuff, because they're not, it's like selective prosecution, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it. And they're targeted individuals in the city of Denver, have been that way for years. I've been fighting for them for years. And the judicial system, the judges explain it to them right there, but they don't understand. They're mentally ill. They don't understand that, and they're just being pushed to take a deal. But if you choose to use drugs or alcohol, you get all these chances around the world through drug court and stuff. I know many people that have many chances because they use drugs. Oh, we need to help them. But it's like, screw the homeless, screw the poor. That isn't right. The judicial system is broken. This should not be happening. And DPD should not be arresting people for these petty offenses where they can be talked to or even seek help. The officers don't do that and hand out information about the stuff. They just move them along. There's not the help for these people in this system, and it's wrong, and it needs to be dealt with. And the officers, District 6 mainly, needs to stop harassing them. These are people too, and even through the judicial system, they get treated like crap. They really do.
Thank you for your
It's
comments.
just wrong. And how they're treated, I've seen how they're treated in jail still, after all the revised, how they're supposed to act in jail. But they're abused by the system, and they're abused in jail, and they are sick, and they need help.
Nice job.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Abby, and I'm the Liberty Free.
Yes, he is.
I am an activist and protester in this city. Okay, so I go through the Denver judicial system a lot. Okay, I'm constantly being persecuted for what we know as what we call contempt of cop charges. Typical disturbing the peace, harassment, whatever. Simply for what we say. Okay? Not only for what we say, ma'am, I want to thank you, Ms. Mays, for everything that you do for our
Gotta love the
I do
ACLU.
that all the time.
Get a warrant.
The city criminalizes us and makes us seem like we are violent, crazy, terrorists, or whatever. Okay? I hopefully get homeless every Sunday. I cook for them all day long on Saturday. I also roll cigarettes and hand them out. Okay? Some of this comes because it's just donated from people who watch what I do and they say, hey, here's 5 bags of cigarettes this big or whatever. Do that thing you do, right? But the city makes me look like this crazy criminal, right? Like this totally violent, scary individual. Okay? The city has some.
Do you have a question, sir?
Okay, my question is, what are we going to do? The city has an ordinance, I don't know what it's called, it's a mandate, I guess. It is called Chief Justice Directive 0404, and it comes from the Chief Justice of Colorado. Okay, all these things they're doing for the homeless and the poor is great, but what's happening is that when they're being criminalized, when you go to the public defender's office, I want to know what's being done about the fact that they are not obeying a simple 23-page directive, which is called Chief Justice Directive 0404. Their forms are incorrect. They hide the form that gives the rights to the people. Okay, if you were to question this and raise your voice about it, you will have 20 cops standing in that room if you threaten, your liberty and safety, and there's violence on you, because I spoke up, and mind you, we are being denied by the receptionist. Not even a lawyer.
Sir, sorry, can I ask a clarifying question? I'm sorry, I understand your question. When you say they are not complying with the directive, who's they?
I apologize. It would be the public defender's office or the city. Okay. I take it up to the highest person in this. I believe is I can't remember her name right now, which is the chief of public defender's office, okay? She's been sued for this. They're still doing the same thing. I stand outside and I've recorded many, many days over months of, they actually have on the front door of the public defender's office, it says that your requirements for being able to obtain a public defender are those things which are expressly excluded in Chief Justice Directive 0404. In other words, they're not allowed to even ask you that, right? They can't ask you, do you have to have, do you, are you a government assistant? Okay? They want you to prove that you are a government assistant. I have a friend who is serving 5 years in jail. They expected him to bring notarized statements of the money that was given to him in his cup from holding a sign. So they expect us to go, excuse me ma'am, thank you for that 39 cents, if you would mind standing over here to the side with my notary, so that I can notarize and we can verify that you gave me this money. So
I think I understand the
you see what I'm saying, which is really absurd, so I want to know, who do we go to?
Right.
Who do we speak to? Who do we know when this situation arises? Because it's a guaranteed loss as a defendant, so you're going to go there, you're guaranteed to pay the fines, do whatever they do.
I think we understand your
But here's
question.
the
We're
difference.
running out of time,
Sure,
so
and it's just,
let me see if I can find.
It's specific to us too.
So
So.
the one thing I was gonna say, just real quickly,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
I want to understand, no, I just wanted to know if you.
And I apologize for
Great.
taking so much time, I just
Okay.
Well,
Like-
a Chief Justice Directive is not applicable to the city of Denver, because that's a city, that's a municipal court, and a Chief Justice Directive is a state court mandate. So I don't really know if the municipal public defender's office has its own way of, if your question is how do you get public defender assistance, that has nothing to do with the Chief Justice in Denver.
Right.
That's only state and county
But
court,
what
not
is the
municipal
city
court.
though? What is the city their policies? Okay.
And I don't know what those are.
They have agreed to follow that.
Okay, yeah,
So
that I
if
don't
you've
know.
agreed to it and use their forms and everything, then follow it, don't alter it and make it, because obviously if you're asking me if I have government assistance, you're making a judgment on that. And the reason why it's mandated, it says it can't be asked because, if you judge on that, then, you actually lose that right, right? So
That makes
that's why I
sense.
say that.
I hear you loud. So I don't think anyone here has the answer to your question, but we'll get your information.
I just wanted to bring it, more
To
than
the
a question, I just
public's
wanted to bring it to somebody's
Thank you.
attention that matters, and that actually makes a change. That's the attention. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, if there are any other questions around the criminal justice reform measures that were passed this last legislative session, I want to thank again Denise Mays and Judge Spahn for being here as our subject matter experts.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to shift our discussion. We're still in the lane of and realm of speaking about criminal justice reform, but we do have a very special guest who is here to talk to us a little bit about a different program that is being implemented. To talk to us a little bit about a unique program that we're seeing be used and utilized in New Orleans, and something worth bringing to the public's attention that we think that is worth sharing. So I think with that, I'd like to ask Dr. McGee to come up and join us. Thank you. So, and the microphone is yours. Okay, if you'd like to stand, that's great. We should just get you a mic.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me. I moved because that light was really I apologize. I sound really congested. Woke up this morning with a really stuffy head. I'm happy to be back in Denver. I'm originally from New Orleans. I lived in Fort Collins for 3 years as I pursued my doctorate degree, and then I moved to Denver in August of 2004, and I remained in Denver until December 2014. So I've been back home in New Orleans since January 2015. My role with the New Orleans Police Department, I'm the academic administrator of the Education and Training Division. We're responsible for initial recruit training, and we're also responsible for continuing professional education. How many of you knew that police officers have continuing professional education? Police officers are lifelong learners. So when we say continuing professional education, what do you think about? Do you automatically think about recertification for what? firearms driving. Well, it's beyond that. Our continuing professional education focuses upon our mission, which is constitutionally based, bias-free, community-grounded policing. And so because of that, every year our officers, in addition to those traditional certifications that everyone thinks about when they think about law enforcement officers, in addition, they have training in legal updates. In New Orleans Police Department, our officers have training every year in crisis intervention. We focus upon how do we interact with members of the communities who have mental health issues. So we also, in addition to officers having crisis intervention training, we have a cadre of crisis intervention trained officers, so that on every platoon, there are at least 2 officers in every district who are CIT trained. So if an officer gets a call for service and it's assessed that the person has mental health issues, then someone with that expertise is brought in. And so tonight I'm here to talk about EPIC, which is Ethical Police, which is an acronym for Ethical Policing is Courageous. And EPIC is based on the research that talks about what happens when someone in a profession makes a decision and takes action that is unethical. Now, I'm speaking from the perspective of law enforcement, but I also spent 5 years at the University of Colorado School of Medicine at Andrews campus. And we know that in health professions and in every profession, there's situations that arise where, I'm going to use the terminology that I heard in the School of Medicine, a workaround, where you know someone on the shift is not quite up to par, but everybody will kind of work around to compensate for that person, right? Now, that's not just in health professions, it's not just in law enforcement, it's in every profession. But because of the interactions between law enforcement officers and the community, it is important that we grasp that issue at the core. And at the core, when a police officer dons his or her uniform, they're just like anybody else on the job. And when they go to work, they bring themselves with them. So in New Orleans, we also focus, as the Academy Academic Director, we focus on teaching and learning in all 3 of the learning domains. That's cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. In law enforcement, you think about the psychomotor domain, driving, firearms, using the weapons on duty, right?
The death belt.
And we know about the cognitive domain, you have to know the law. You have to know the NOPD policy. You have to know the difference between a municipal and a state charge, right? However, the affective domain is where law enforcement has struggled. What is the affective domain? That is the emotional and the mental health, right? And so let's go back to that officer. He or she, they've donned their uniform. They're going to work. But just like everyone else, when they go to work, inside of them are the issues of their life. Maybe they had a tough time with the spouse at home. Maybe they had a sick child and they were up all night. All of these circumstances affect how a person interacts and engages at work.
You can keep on my Patreon.
Because we're charged with protecting.
I don't seem to be getting that right yet, Lacey.
You still have to protect and serve, even though you've been up all night with a sick child. Or maybe you work the detail. Or maybe you have a sick elderly parent. Or the same situations that affect all of us in life. So I'm using that to set the context for why EPIC was so necessary. It was necessary to help to save the careers of well-intentioned, hardworking law enforcement officers. Now, some of the research that we use is on active bystandership. We know what that means, right? Active and passive bystandership. You've seen the research. You've watched the show with John Canoas, right? What would you do? Right? Something happens, you know it's wrong. How many of you can find voice and take a stand, right? So the same thing is what we're talking about in EPIC, with law enforcement officers serving together. If you know that the person you're working with has had a rough night or is struggling, and you see them about to do something, you can intervene. So it is a peer intervention program for officers developed by officers in conjunction with the community. So on our committee, we would have some of the persons who just spoke, some of our harshest critics were part of the committee that worked on the foundation for the EPIC program. So the research around
That would never
active
happen in
passive
Denver.
bystandership, something happens. I don't know where you work. Wherever you work, something's going on. Let's make it something small. It's back to school season. Office supplies. Your child needs some of those yellow highlighters. Well, just go over to the stock room. Imagine if everybody who worked at the company got their school supplies that their child needed from that stock. Now, somebody might say, well, that's not right. Let's take it from the company. And others, well, I work hard here, and I stay late, I come early, and I make a fair wage, but you know, it's not that hard, right? But we know that those things build up, and it becomes a problem. Ethical policing. When police officers are at work, when I always say to the officers that when someone dials 911, they're usually not having a good day. And if an officer who reports to a scene is at a space emotionally, or even in terms of their mental health and their well-being, or sometimes they're physically sick. How many of you go to work when you're just not quite feeling well, but you're gonna push through? Officers do the same thing.
But we don't carry
right?
guns.
And so I'm trying to get you to understand, this is about the human condition. Police officers are just like everyone else.
The only difference is that they get to, you know.
I'm gonna walk over because I need to hear you.
I'm sorry, ma'am, the difference between for them, because it's not just that simple. The difference is that they're the only ones that, because of their safety or whatever, they're the only ones that can pull out a gun and kill somebody and not pay for it,
So
right?
let's be clear.
You know,
Let's
because of
break-
that mental
let's-
condition,
let's
because of
break
that,
down
they're
this-
having a bad day,
let's
it can
break
end
down
somebody.
the statement that you said,
Mhm.
and I want to be fair to you, because I know the protocol here is that there will be a time for you to ask questions.
So it was just difficult
But
to hold that
because
one
I'm
back.
from the South,
It was hard to hold that
I'm
one back.
polite and listen to you, but
That's
I
fine.
want you to be polite and respectful to me.
Sure,
okay?
go ahead.
So, let's take what you said. Yes, that's why I said our officers are well versed in constitutional policing. They have the legal right based on the behavior
Correct.
or the inappropriate behavior of someone to restrict their freedom. And because of that, we're very clear. We want to make sure that our officers are cognizant of their behavior, and so that they anchor themselves in doing what's right. And sometimes the most well-intentioned person may not be feeling well, the situation may get out of control. And what we're saying is that we have given our officers the tools to intervene with one another to prevent them, even when they're provoked, right?
Right.
Because sometimes you're just standing up giving a presentation, someone might interrupt you, you might feel a little provoked, right?
Yes, ma'am.
But officers are well trained
Right.
to stay within the bounds of the law. But what I'm saying is that when a situation arises, when someone is provoked, we're using this process for officers to give each other the tools and the space to intervene. So let me give you an example.
Thank you for
Real-life
taking the time,
example.
yes.
So, most of you are familiar with the French Quarter. You've seen Bourbon Street on television. So we have a downtown development district where officers are detailed to the French Quarter. There's the 8th district that man on patrol is the 8th district, which is the French Quarter, but there's additional officers there. So an officer who happened to be a female noticed a vehicle double parked outside of the store. She proceeded to say to the driver, even though he had his hazards on, which means what? I'm gonna run right in and I'll be right out. You're parked illegally, sir. I need you to move your automobile. Oh, just right. She said, sir, you're parked illegally. You need to move your automobile. Oh, I'll be right. Sir, you're parked illegally. I need you to move the vehicle now, or I will write a ticket. turns around and says to the officer, "You don't know who I am. I work for City Councilman blank, 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 and I am da-da-da, and I will do this." She immediately called for backup because that unit at that time didn't have BWCs, but now they do. Body-worn cameras, yes. So she called for backup. Another officer from the district came. He proceeded to approach the gentleman. "You are parked illegally. We need you to move the vehicle now."
Lacey, I only want my PayPal there.
You will be issued a ticket. So then he began to berate the female officer. And she was getting very upset and agitated and started to pace. And then the other officer started to put space between himself by using his body between that person who now was being very loud and belligerent and trying to make a point because he thought he just wanted to run in the store and she should understand, right? So the officer gets between them. And then the gentleman says, "And you, and what's your name? And what's your badge number? And who's your supervisor? I'm gonna see that you're written up." So now she's getting more and more agitated. And her partner looks at her and he just whispers, "Epic, epic." And she's agitated and she's annoyed. And he goes and he whispers in her ear, "Epic, take a moment." And she stepped back and she walked away. And he, the other officer, wrote the ticket, presented it to the gentleman. He signed it, Donald Duck. But on the BWC, on the body-worn camera, he had yelled. He worked for the city, identified as a city council person. This story that I'm telling, our mayor, LaToya Cantrell, told this story at our EPIC conference this summer. And what she said is that, and that person who formerly worked for the city of New Orleans was so agitated, even though he signed the ticket, Daffy Duck, or Donald Duck, and took the ticket, on Monday, he called the mayor's office. And he said to one of her staff members, "I need to report a police officer who was rude and disrespectful to me." And the person in the mayor's office, being well trained by the mayor, said, "Sir, you want the mayor to stop what she's doing to talk to you about an incident with a police officer?" The mayor stands with the police department, and she believes that that officer was probably working within his duties. If you have a complaint, go to the Citizens Oversight Committee. So he continues to yell and scream. The person in the mayor's office calls the supervisor, and that person is no longer employed by the city of New Orleans. So the two things that happened there is, one, the first female officer who was insulted and belittled could have done the very human thing and responded negatively to that person. But because her peer intervened and whispered in her ear, 3 times he had to say it, but when he said epic, she understood that lifeline was coming to her. Because if you retaliate, now you have a case against you. If you retaliated, you are not being a professional. If you retaliate, you're dishonoring the uniform and the charge that you took. And so that's what we train our officers to do, to intervene for one another because they matter to each other. And we're also concerned about the emotional well-being and the mental health of our officers. We know the statistics that most law enforcement officers within 3 years of retirement will die either by suicide, heart attack, or some other tragic illness. Officers suffer with PTSD because they suck it up and they keep going. But what we're saying is we want to pay attention. Not just because, but because you chose an honorable profession to put on a uniform and to go out and pledge yourself at the risk of your life, that you pledge to protect and serve the public, that you're still human. You still have all of those other personal issues. But when you go to work, we expect the highest level of professionalism. And so we give our officers the tools to intervene with one another. So EPIC training, every officer in the New Orleans Police Department has received the basic 8-hour EPIC core training. Every new recruit receives the 8-hour basic core training. We have attached EPIC for our recertification to our officer assistance and wellness training. So we have an officer assistance and wellness program that talks about if you're having a rough day, that you can go to your rank and say, you know, something's going on. And you don't have to divulge, and you can say, I need officer assistance. And they're not penalized for that. So we have built in, based on the research and with community input, what does it take for us to police ourselves? Because we believe that our officers are there to protect and serve at the highest level of professionalism. So that's what ethical policing is about. I have brochures for you. I also have my personal card that I'm happy to share with you. The one thing that I'd like you to think about and to take away is that, think about a time when you were employed, some people are blessed enough to be retired, or you may have just been born with that silver spoon in your mouth, and you're just, as the young people would say, living your best life, doing what you do, how you do it. But imagine a time when you were in a situation when you were challenged, right? Our buttons get pushed all the time, right? I taught school. I taught first grade,
There you go, top right.
fourth grade, sixth grade, science, middle school science. I taught at the University of Colorado, Denver, in the teacher education program for 5 years. And then I did academic research. And on any given day, someone could say something to me that would be insulting, demeaning, disrespectful, but I still responded as a professional. And that's the grace that I would like to see the community offer to police officers. Not rush to judgment, and to realize that police officers are in families and responsibilities just as everyone else. And what we're doing is we're being proactive. We're saying to our officers, we're saying that if you know, for example, let's talk about domestic violence. Some officers may have a trigger because of some traumatic event in their family background with domestic violence. Mm-hmm. Some officers may have grown up in a household with domestic violence. When you work with someone and you know their triggers, if you're on a domestic violence scene, you can look at our website. I think it's epicnopd.org.
And some of them just beat the shit out of their wives before they went to work.
From officers who testified that they noticed a pattern. If someone was on a certain call, they automatically would think that the male was the aggressor and, you know, took sort of a really tough stand in a domestic violence situation with a male and a female. And just talk to the person and say, you know, hey, bro, I noticed every time we're on the DV scene, you know, you automatically, because the law is to what? Separate both parties and hear the stories of both. And so what one officer realized is that it was a trigger. And so if it was a domestic violence call, that person had to do a bit of self-reflection before rushing to judgment. And I would challenge any of you that whatever field that you're in, that you've had a moment when you maybe rushed to judgment or you weren't as reflective. And what we're saying is that because of the high pressure that police officers work under, we know that they need specific tools to check their own emotional register and to know where they're standing and to have a process by which to intervene. And also in EPIC, if an officer intervenes and stops someone, they realize they're saving that person's career. And they're also really doing what we're called to do, and that is to protect and serve. So that's EPIC.
And saving every civilian's life from the hands of a violent pig.
Questions for you, and then we'll go over to the
Okay, the light is just getting to me, so don't mind.
Can you talk to us about what kind of data you collected to demonstrate the effectiveness of this program and reducing use of force incidents, say?
Good question.
Good question. And it's the first we get, right? because everyone wants to reduce and to know that we're having an impact on the use of force.
Or anything that's, you know.
Right, so what we're finding is, number one, because academically, you know, I have done program evaluation, we know that we're in the early stages. And what we're looking at right now is just anecdotal results based upon cultural changes. Now, you've heard about the blue wall, right? Where police officers.
Can you hear Charlie Brown's teacher talking right
What
now?
we're finding is that we are saying to the officers that your role is to protect the city and the citizens of New Orleans. Your role is to protect what is right. And so in terms of outcomes, what we're finding is that officers who are veterans and seasoned officers and may have been in service for over 15 years when our training wasn't as intentional as it is now, that it took more for them to come on board. And because of that, we're noticing that the newer officers with 3 years or less, their expectations and their understanding of how to treat the public is completely different. I'm sure that most of you are well aware of the critical incidents that happened after Hurricane Katrina, where citizens were murdered and the officers covered up for one another. We make sure to talk about that and to remind our officers that that type of behavior is not tolerated in the New Orleans Police Department. So to give you an example of what I call anecdotal, we have mixed jurisdiction service. So we have Louisiana State Police, and we may have someone from,
You guys can also look up the Miami River murders.
we may have officers working together in private details and in other situations. About a year ago, a person was arrested and they were handcuffed, but they were resisting. But that person was handcuffed, and while the person was handcuffed, someone who was from another jurisdiction kicked the handcuffed individual. And an officer from New Orleans Police Department said, "Hey, we don't do that here. We don't do that." So that's our best example. That our officers, what we're doing is changing the culture of policing and how officers interact with one another.
Yes, Lacey.
Does anyone else have a question?
I do.
We'll go to the public in a second, okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. McGee, for your presentation. In the pamphlet, it says that there are built-in procedural incentives for the members of the department. Could you say what that means?
So for officers, so let's go back to reality. If someone is handcuffed or in any way detained and an officer uses excessive force, under our policy, that officer and others who are there who don't do anything are subject to disciplinary action. And so the built-in incentives are that if you intervene or if you try to stop someone and they still take action, then it's a mitigating factor when that case is investigated. So you know that when a use of force case is investigated, everybody present, right, is investigated. And so if you try to intervene, but someone still continues to do something that was inappropriate, you, because you're present, are part of the problem, and you're investigated by Public Integrity Bureau. But in that investigatory process,
Thank you, Lacey.
if the BWC or anything else shows that you tried to intervene, you tried to de-escalate, you tried to defuse it, then you are not, that's considered in your case. So that's what that refers to.
I have one question, and this is kind of ties in. Here in Denver, we have what's called the Back to Basics program, and I don't have the exact date or time. I don't know the length of it, but
is that time?
Your time, yeah, that's time.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Back to Basics program is similar, right? And then a district, I believe District 6, has mental health professionals who do ride-alongs with 6, I think, and 2, in which when they encounter a citizen that's having some type of mental distress, they partner with the city to have them available. One question I have, something that you've mentioned, one component though that we don't have, is, as far as I'm aware, is the citizen component when you're constructing this program. And I'm interested in the types of methods and what the New Orleans Police Department did to bring more of the citizenry into that process in setting up the EPIC program.
So historically, and just in all honesty and transparency, the New Orleans Police Department is under a federal consent decree. EPIC came about not because of the consent decree, but it came about from some conversations. Mary Howell is a civil rights attorney who's represented many families in use of force cases. She sued a very critical case from the 1990s where a young woman, her death was actually ordered by a road police officer who's now on death row. And Mary Howell represented her family. And so Mary Howell has been the voice against excessive force in law enforcement. She sits on that committee. Ted Quaint is also a community activist, strong voice against excessive force. He sits on that committee. So it was important for us to have the balance that we needed to, well, one of the things that we realized that we're allies. Even though, and maybe that's the Southern phenomenon, maybe that's just the down-home people that we are, but we realize that our strength comes from hearing everything that's said about us and responding to it. And so those persons were a part of the planning committee. The scenarios that were written for the training, they were a part and had voice to it. They gave us information on what felt and tried so that we could be authentic. And so they were welcomed and invited to be a part of the plan.
So would you say it was
No, she's not a Colorado native. She's
effort, or was it did you have that
she's from New Orleans,
from
Louisiana.
elected officials to try to push that? What side did that come on? Just
It was a combination of all of the above.
Thank you.
And it has, it started with one administration and moved through the next mayoral administration.
Thank you.
Come on.
Any questions for Dr. McGee? Thank you, Dr. McGee.
You're welcome.
I guess I'd like to ask if there's any community members that have questions. Similar to before, would you please come up to the mic and introduce yourself and then ask your question. And in the interest of making sure that everyone has time to ask the questions, if you keep them to just a couple minutes, that would be very, very good. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Karen Collier. I'm a community activist, and I appreciate you coming and explaining the program that you have in New Orleans. I have a couple questions about what's included in that training. I guess the first question is whether or not there have been revisions perhaps in the hiring process where an assessment is done to assess the mental and emotional worthiness of a person who applies for law enforcement.
Well, the psychological assessment is a part of the process, the hiring process. Every officer, when they're in the recruitment phase, has an extensive background check, physical, mental, and a psychological battery.
Okay. So, for example, if an officer or a candidate revealed that they were in the service and had post-traumatic stress disorder, would they perhaps be flagged as a candidate that perhaps wouldn't be mentally worthy of the force?
So first of all, when you're hiring, we follow all the EEOC laws. So we cannot discriminate against someone because they were in the armed forces.
Okay.
Right? And so, again, a psychological screening will assess someone's suitability for law enforcement.
Okay.
And so that's the most information I can give you on that. Anyone who served in the armed forces, just like everyone else, is entitled to apply for employment anywhere, and we cannot discriminate on the basis of that. So it's the psychological assessment that would determine that.
I guess I was reflecting on you talking about an officer's ability to identify triggers as a result of what his background may include, that being post-traumatic stress disorder or a trigger with regard to domestic violence and his background. And sometimes that takes, a lot of commitment and years of therapy to overcome that, so that you can, first of all, identify that you have those triggers, and then to be able to overcome them in stressful situations. I wonder, is it fair to expect a police officer who's got that kind of background to be able to respond in an appropriate way when they haven't had access to that kind of treatment and have the ability to overcome those triggering
So if I can, I think I'm hearing you say, or you're asking about the suitability of one officer to assess the mental state or the emotional balance of another officer. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that if you notice someone is not handling the situation, that you can intervene using the tools that they've been trained with to intervene to prevent that behavior. Now, you're going to a deeper end of the spectrum into psychological assessment. I mean, again, I like to contextualize everything into any field, right? We have in any field, in any work, you could be bagging groceries at the supermarket, and anything could possibly be a trigger from the past. What I'm saying is that in the capacity of a law enforcement officer in those high pressure situations, we're saying that we're paying attention to the behaviors of our officers. We're paying attention to their mental health and their mental well-being, and we're also looking for patterns of behavior. Now, as far as the psychological assessment, that does stand, and officers or applicants are turned away on a daily basis because they're deemed not fit because of the psychological assessment. Okay. So that is a part of the hiring process. Okay. And I think that part of that process, and I want to be clear again about PTSD in the military. We want to honor everyone, and we cannot discriminate and say that and just say that any class of individuals applying are not eligible because of something else. But those, we stand by the recruitment and the hiring process with the psychological assessment.
Okay. One other question, is implicit bias part of this particular program?
Well, first of all, when I said that our officers follow our philosophy of constitutionally based, bias-free, community-oriented policing. So all of the officers in the New Orleans Police Department had a basic 8-hour course on just implicit bias. And then every year in our continuing professional education, they have additional training on implicit biases. And we also work with advocacy groups from the community about the interactions they've had with police officers and any aspect, any demographic in the community who believes that their particular group is being pointed out. We convene focus groups every year as we plan our training for the next year. So we get the input, and we also look at our statistics to see if there's a pattern of behavior against any particular demographic. So our officers are trained and retrained continually.
Thank you.
You're welcome. These lights are killing me.
Hello, my name is Karen Starr. I'm an activist.
Nice to meet you.
You too, ma'am. Thanks for being here. A lot of my activism does have to do with police brutality and excessive force. I may try to get through this without being interrupted and then give you the floor, because I lose my train of thought easily, if that would be all right.
If you do the same for me, I'll do the same.
For me, right off the bat, cops out of the gate know what they are and are not supposed to do. It's clear cut to me. Some may have a different attitude, like you said, 3 years or whatever, coming out of the academy, but they get with the veteran police and stuff, and they teach them the real ropes, right? They should be held accountable. They are wearing a badge and a gun. You should be ethical because you are the law. You are the law enforcement. You have this high standard of serving and protecting, right? They should, I believe they should not be a cop if their buttons are pushed so easily and if they're triggered so easily. We've seen that in and out through years of activism and just watching them, taping them, and they do behave better when they are on film, when we have YouTubers and such that are right there. And they are law enforcement, so they should be held at a higher standard as regular people. There are some, and another question too.
I have another question. Do you have a question?
Yes. One of my questions is, ma'am, is what happens after they're hired? Maybe they've been on the job for a while, and they are found to have mental illness. I mean, like go yelling at a person, I hate you, I'm gonna hurt you, this and that, and just
Are you
go.
asking if,
Yes.
if that has happened?
Yes,
Or are you assuming
because
that
the ones that we have seen, one in particular got 2 days suspension.
New Orleans police officers?
Huh?
New Orleans police officers?
No,
So
here in
I'm
Denver, here in
I'm
Denver.
speaking about New Orleans police, and I can't
But to
speak
me,
to the
this
Denver
kinda
police
goes-
officer.
yeah.
Do you have a question about the EPIC program or New Orleans police?
Yes, because she like asked
So what's your
hiring.
question?
So my question was, if they passed and
They passed the psych eval.
yes, and they're a police officer,
Mhm.
what happens to them? Because here in Denver, the ones that we've seen don't have to go back for mental health help or anything. They just
So
get
let me-
suspended for 2
okay.
days. What happens with that with your program?
So in New Orleans, we have officer assistance program. And I mentioned our continuing professional education. So officers are reminded of the services that are available to them. And they're encouraged to use those services. Also, we have insight and early intervening process where supervisors rate officers. And through insight and supervisory feedback logs, a supervisor can say to someone, I notice you're taking a lot of sick leave. Is everything okay? I notice you have a pattern of absenteeism. Is anything going on? If a supervisor notices someone coming to work disheveled or looking like they're not well rested, then it's up to the supervisor to recommend them to officer assistance program. Can't speak for the Denver Police Department, but we have built-in systems to respond to officers when we recognize that something is happening.
Well, that would be awesome. So your police department in New Orleans
Yes.
must be much better than Denver, because we
I
do
can't
not
speak
see
to
that happening in
Denver.
Denver. And also, really quick, let me get these slots. With the excessive force and stuff that is dealt with, it seems like most of them are not held accountable, so it keeps going. It's a pattern.
So
and a
I'll answer that, and there is someone else waiting. I invite you to go to the New Orleans Police Department website. We have our real-time crime data available. The use of force board meets regularly just to respond to that. If someone has been deemed excessive use of force, then the necessary actions are taken. But in our system, we automatically look at our training. So we track trends. So if there's a trend, for example, with an issue with handcuffing, unfortunately it went the other direction for us. Someone was handcuffed poorly and had not been searched properly. And they pulled out a gun and they killed a police officer who was transporting them. And so We look at our use of force data and we look for trends and patterns, and it comes back to training. So if we see a pattern in terms of excessive force, then it goes back to training. If we, for example, for our 2020 training, we're looking at what happens when someone has passive resistance, right? Not active resistance, they're not kicking and screaming, they're just sitting there. But they violated some law and they have to be arrested. Then how do you handcuff them, keep that person safe and keep yourself safe? So we have specific training around those issues. So again, I can't speak to the Denver Police Department, but I can tell you that we use our use of force data, and we have a very rigorous and well-vetted use of force policy. It is online, it is available for public view, that I would recommend you read it and maybe, talk to the police department if there's something that you'd like to see. But again, we work really hard to stay in conversation. We see our community advocates as our allies, and they see the New Orleans Police Department as allies, not adversaries. And so we work hard to have the conversations to make sure that our training is responsive to the needs of our community.
Thank you. Real quickly, Denver Police Department has gone back for training several times and they still react.
The same. The same. Not worse.
So I will say to you,
And
Ms.
that-
Sarah,
sorry.
I don't have the time to add, but this, passing
We have
resistance
an
hasn't
annual
helped.
conference, so we'd invite
Well,
you.
it's my turn to
recommend.
finish. I haven't really got to talk and tell my proofs. But people are abused. They have told me I'm a
I know. I'm so sorry
fat
that
ugly
happened
bitch,
to
I
you.
stink,
I'm so sorry
and
that
that
happened to you.
I
We
should
did.
kill myself over and over again. The police department here,
Ms. Starr,
okay?
I'm
And because
sorry,
of this thin blue line, the other cops laugh about it and join in. They
Okay.
join in
Ms. Starr,
I'm
with
so
the other
sorry
police.
that happened to
This,
you.
because of the thin blue line, will not work. These
Okay.
cops do not
Thank you for
listen.
sharing your opinion. We appreciate your opinion.
Very quickly, I thank you, Ms. Starr, for your comments and your questions. I do want just 2 points. Number one is that Denver does have an early intervention program for their police department where they try to
It
track
doesn't work,
numbers.
and they do
And
the
we
same,
can-
they act the same, ma'am.
I'm not debating with you how.
I'm
their
not
conduct.
either,
I was
'cause
just
I know
telling you
I've lived
that
it and
they
seen
do
it.
have an early intervention program where they do try to track the trends and identify individuals who may be having problems and maybe.
And if there was any good cops, they'd stop the bad
You
cops from
also
doing what
raised
they
a very
do.
good question or point in your comments that I wanted to highlight and
Thank you.
actually ask Dr. McGee about,
Thank you.
which is you expressed, and Dr. McGee, so this question's for you. She expressed the idea or the notion that because police officers wear a badge and carry a gun, that your analogy that they're just like everyone else. I understand you're humanizing them, and that's important. But she said something that struck me that I'd love your opinion on, which is that because of that, they should be held to a higher standard.
And they absolutely are. They are. They absolutely are. And that's why we have all of the, we use all of the technology. We actually use body-worn cameras. When I mentioned the downtown development district and some of the specialized units who didn't have body-worn cameras, everyone is wearing a body-worn camera. We have cameras in the vehicle, but it's not because of the cameras, it's because of their intentionality to do what's right. And you're absolutely right. Law enforcement officers are held to a higher standard, and I believe that our training and our intentionality around fairness and equity point to our efforts to police ourselves, to govern ourselves, and that if any officer violates, they are actually prosecuted to the highest extent of the law. And so yes, they are held to a higher standard, but my point in humanizing it is to say that it's important to realize that officers are human, and they are trained to withstand the excessive and negative complaints from others. They're very well trained how to respond and not to respond when they're deliberately provoked. So that is important.
Actually, community
So
is
thank you
making
for
a
asking.
difference in the New Orleans Police Department.
Thank
We
you.
need that across the
Appreciate that.
country,
Thank you.
across
Thank
the
you.
board. We need more help. Thank you, I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. McGee. My name is Maria. I'm a student. I would like to thank you for taking this courageous opportunity to venture into humanizing police officers. They are held to an other standard, sometimes a higher standard, sometimes a lower standard. But helping them to humanize themselves is something that's very important because they have a job to do in policing the society and also learning to humanize the individuals that they are policing.
Exactly.
What I was wondering, in your review of the situation, are you including the opinions of the family members of the police officers?
Absolutely.
Many times they are the victims of their crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And have you seen a reduction in home stress?
So we're early and anecdotal. And because remember, a lot of people don't want to disclose a lot of personal private things. Some of our measures, for example, our new recruits, we host a family night where we invite the family members, parents, siblings, spouses, partners of the recruits to come in. We talk about their training. We explain how rigorous it's going to be. We also explain about how, as they transition from a civilian to a law enforcement officer, that the support of the family is needed. And also, we tell the families about the Officer Assistance Program. We tell them that it's very stressful, and we let them know what resources are available for families, for counseling, especially in terms of trauma. Every time, unfortunately, when an officer is killed in the line of duty, immediately we open up the doors for officers' assistance, but we also instantly have people who will come in and say, my wife, my spouse, my child, especially hard are children of law enforcement officers, that children sometimes can't go to school and proudly say, my mom's a police officer, my dad's a police officer, because of some negative connotations, right? And so it's very important to speak to all of those family members and let them know what resources are available, because it does impact them. And it doesn't have to be an officer in New Orleans who's killed to have that domino effect of people coming in and wanting to reassess and think about their career and where they stand and how close am I to retirement, and because family members are impacted. So yes, we do reach out to the family members.
Well, thank you for creating that space for them, because it's also hard for them to come and just take a reflective look. So that's really awesome.
Yes, thank you. I'm gonna say that's the end because the lights are getting to me. And again, I invite you to our website. I have the brochures to hand out, and I also have my cards. If anybody wants to email me, contact me. But again, we have an annual conference. I invite Denver Police Department to participate in the EPIC conference. It'll be in June of 2020. And with that, we partner with Loyola University School of Law. And it's hosted at the law school.
Thank you very much. And of course, part of these forums is really to simply hear from the public. So if there are any public comments that you want to make, or the questions that you have for the Citizen Oversight Board, please, you're welcome to come to the mic.
My name is I'm a resident of Denver.
Good to see you.
I wanted to say thank you for Dr. McGee's service to our community. Thank you for your service to our community. I know your Fridays are important, and spending them working to better our community. We appreciate your service.
It's Thursday.
Our regular meetings are on
Fridays.
I just have a comment for the committee. This event is televised, and these pieces of paper that you handed out regarding the definition of the bills that we're talking about, those aren't shared on public TV. So, with that said, I just wanted to make the comment that our community holds you all in high esteem, as being a member of the Oversight Committee, on your unbiased position. And I wanted to encourage you to explain the definitions of the bills being discussed in a way that's unbiased. So my personal belief tonight is that what was shared on public TV was presented by someone who could be obviously viewed as a biased position. So either have the other side of that view, or to have it just simply defined and explained in greater detail by just defining the law, as opposed to someone who is going to reiterate that law under a bias. I wanted to say something else too. As a member of the community, I believe that those who violate the law should be held accountable under the definition of the laws voted in by the people of their respective communities. And I ask you to think about the message you send in your recommendations from today's meeting. Have there been studies on how many reoffend while on PR bond? I don't know if is there anyone in this room who can answer that question. I would like to request, as a citizen, that be something that we put under your consideration. Also, be it for trespassing, domestic violence, etc., I wonder about the victims of these type of low-level offenses. The rest of our society who obeys the law, knowing that there are consequences for breaking the law, what message does it send to them? What about the family who lost a loved one just a few blocks from here, just a few days ago, by a person who 3 months ago pleaded guilty to speeding at over 20 miles an hour, a low-level offense? How important is the message that we hold even these simple violations, the violations they make, we hold these people accountable for their actions, for not obeying the law? In this case, as I just mentioned, what might be seen as a low-level misdemeanor, speeding, running a red light, ultimately cost someone their lives. So please think about the penalties and how important it can be to uphold the law and the message that is sent from the penal process. Not only to the offender, the message the offender receives, and is the PR bond an effective way of sending a message? And are they reoffending while they're on the PR bond? Think about that, but also the confidence of our entire community who live in a safe, who want to live in a safe and law-abiding community. In my opinion, as a resident, as a mother, as a teacher, the price of this confidence is invaluable. So please think about, in your recommendations, both sides, and think about, if it's possible, plan a study of what the reoffenses are while on a PR bond, and ultimately the messages that we send and how effective are PR bonds, and the message it sends to a victim when they've just had a crime committed against them, and within a couple of days that person is released on PR bond. So that's what I asked, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for coming out. There are a lot of different places you could have been on a Thursday evening and towards the end of the summer here in Denver. We really appreciate your attention and your participation in the dialogue that we had here today, or this evening, with regard to changes in the laws here in Colorado, as well as understanding what's happening in other locations across the country with regard to law enforcement and oversight of law enforcement. With that, I would like to ask you to drive home safely, or get home safely however you get home, and thank you again for your participation. Have a good night.
Alrighty, guys. So you guys saw it. You heard it live. I believe it was a positive thing. I think. A lot of things were spoken. I like these folks. I've never come here before. I think these folks are wonderful. Sir, I just want to thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for coming.
I love the way you guys diffuse everything. Huh?
Well,
we can be a little rowdy sometimes.
I'm glad to hear it, man.
You know, but thank you very much.
No, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. I think this lady's amazing. I'm going to interview her, so she'll let me talk to her.
I know. That's awesome. So how much more do you have? Yeah. Okay. Do you live in this area?
Just south of it.
Okay. Right on. Okay. Well, I'm so glad you came.
I saw this event.
It's nice to see the youth involved like this.
Yeah, exactly.
And then both you and Alicia were here, so
Yeah.
that was the perfect time. I'm actually going to
Yes, please.
the commission.
Okay.
I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for what you do, ma'am. Thank you very much.
That's interesting. That was very interesting, right? It's a complex situation. Yeah.
I thought she was there earlier today.
What's going on?
Thank you guys for being here and doing what you do.
I need to get your information.
Yes, sir, please.
That's okay. Let me get your information real quick, just so we can follow up with you.
Absolutely.
So my name is Cisco. I've been on the board for a minute.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Cisco. My name is Abity.
There you go. If you could just type in information.
Sure.
Make sure we try to get back to you.
We're doing a peace march this weekend. We're going to be there.
Oh, okay.
For sure. What you guys haven't reached out, some of you guys are probably like pretty busy with that, so I was going to do it afterwards. I just said if I could talk to you briefly.
Yeah.
But for sure, just trying to see what we can do. Trying to reduce some stuff in cities.
Yes. Yeah, that Matt Ariano, that was our Matthew Ariano, got killed like during 4th of July. That was one of our kids for a long time. His whole family, his sister. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on.
I reached out to Mr. McMillan.
Oh, yeah.
Joey Davis pretty soon as well.
Oh, yeah, the whole MBK stuff.
Yeah, trying to see what else we're going to do.
So what kind of stuff are you guys going to be doing down there?
By the way, you can download these from Denver8.tv as well, like the whole video.
I don't have anything set just yet, just trying to get ideas.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Cisco. Anytime, man. Absolutely. And also, Mr. Cisco, you can feel free to give it to any one of the folks here that might want that number, okay? What?
I can't see
but I used to.
You have a good evening, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm pretty sure
Big room, small room. Thank you guys for being here with us. This is how you get things changed in your community. You get involved into the. You get involved with your citizens oversight boards in your community, right? Anything that's for change, and the change that would benefit your community, right? Take your time. Cancel some appointments, right? Try not to, deny yourself some pleasures, right? And do what you need to do to be able to stand up for your community. How you doing, Jason? Thanks for being here, bro. You guys have me laughing so hard, MD. Yeah, because these guys are anti-police violence, right? So this lady right here, she needs to be the one that trains them on how to defuse situations, right? Because she did a beautiful job of handling this meeting, and you know, no violence, no threats made or whatever. Yeah.
Thank you. Everything that goes with it. They're violent. Yeah. So you first have to do. Nope. Thank you. You first have to have the support systems in place to make sure they're right.
And I don't think we have. I don't think we have like an officer assistance in wellness.
Hi, my name's Abity.
I'm Nikki.
Nice to meet you, Miss Nikki. Abity. That's all, folks. Abity.
That's the song, right?
No, I used to be Porky Pig's. Abity.
Okay. Yeah. That's great. That's what I was
So, yes, ma'am. Thank you guys for being here, and thank you for doing what you do.
One of the biggest part of Auckland to be an expert. It's easier for me to go to New Orleans to learn than.
I want to thank her.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's nice to meet you, John. Please reach out. I'd like to talk to you.
Hi, ma'am.
Sir.
Abity. I'm known as Liberty Fig TV on YouTube. I want to thank you for what you guys do.
Sure. Well, thank you for coming.
You need to be the one that holds a training class on how to defuse situations. You're awesome. You hear me? I mean, you are amazing. That was beautiful the way you did it.
So let me ask you: did we get your information so that we can get back to you on your
Yes,
question?
I gave it to Cisco, and I told him to please give it to all of you guys.
Okay, great.
And then I'll talk to you like off camera and stuff. So everybody's watching. Everybody wants to. They're very concerned about what's going on in Denver.
Yeah.
And they're being very strict with us, being us, the First Amendment activists who are legally astute and have cameras all the time, right? So now they're doing kind of like the Atlas shrugs, right? It's like, we got to make that illegal, and then we got to make that, So now they're making it so.
Sure.
Even our most basic First Amendment things.
What organization are you all with?
Those folks are mostly Occupy Denver.
Occupy Denver.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And me, I'm just independent. I'm just me. And I met them, and I was touched by the corruption of the municipality, and then I became an activist myself. So, being a homeless man and being under the indigent poverty thing or whatever affords me, things that I can do to be able to stand up for what's right.
Yeah.
And for my community. So.
I hear you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And thank
you for doing what you do.
Patience with the process. I know it's
Yes.
not perfect.
It's okay. You guys were awesome. You're here. There was no thugs here today. There was no threats of violence.
Usually there is not.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. All right, guys. So there you have it live. You guys were able to see something in conversation without the threat of violence or the manipulation, of what's being said by men with guns and everything. And thank you, ma'am. My name is Abity. Great questions. So, this is kind of new to me too, right? This is really new to me too. So, I'm new at doing this. I'm just doing what I think I know is right, and that's all I got, right? That's all you can do. You gotta get up and do it. You just gotta get up and actually do it. Doesn't matter what you know or don't know. Just get up there and talk what you feel, right? If it bothers you, let them know. Find these community, like these things, like these Denver, like the Citizens Oversight Committee or boards, because these are the ones that, the only avenues that we have to be able to fight these things, right? And these kind of corruptions. I want to tell you guys, thank you for everything you were saying. It was hard to be there. I kept laughing. And finally, the people thought I was crazy because they were saying something like it was like nothing to laugh about, but your comments were just so funny I couldn't keep myself. I loved it. Thank you guys for being here. That is so cool, right? That's it. It's over. Not much. Thank you guys for being here. But as you guys can see, there has been some change, right? The LCLU is really busy here for the people. As you can see, this House bill, is brought by them, and that was nice to see Teresa A. Spawn of Devil. You hear her being mentioned by Eric all the time. The spawn of devil was there herself, right? And she had the ACLU chick sitting right next to her. So that was like, that was like oil and vinegar sitting next to each other. How awesome was that? Huh? And as you guys noticed, they immediately left. They said what they had to say, and they were gone. They walked away, and that other lady, that doctor, came up talking, and those two got in their cars and hauled ass. So, hey, oh, I love you guys. Good night. I'll let you guys go. Thanks for being here. Let's all be liberty freaks, huh? Where the hell am I at?